This is me. And if you didn't understand that reference, that was both a Ratatouille reference as well as a Friday the 13th reference rolled into one. Very much a representation of myself, but I guess I'd also ask what rock you were living under that you didn't understand that reference. Let me introduce you to myself. This is me, this is me, this is me, and yes, this is also me. My name is Griffen Penney, and what you are about to witness is my fascination with movies. Ever since I was a kid, I have always been fascinated with movies, and I've pretty much always wanted to make movies. A lot of that fascination comes from my time using VHS, or rather from... Okay, that was another reference as well. Invincible, if you didn't get that. Welcome to my stream of consciousness. In it, you'll find a deep-rooted nostalgia for anything movies. As a kid, I immediately turned to movies for comfort, fascination, and for my future. Emphasis on VHS cannot be understated. I had a VCR pretty much right up until I was about 17. I didn't use it as much in my later years, but I used it very prominently until I was probably about 14 or 15. When my parents got divorced, the VCR went to my dad's, where I would begin my morning ritual of waking up at 6 a.m. for some ungodly reason, eating Lucky Charms, no milk, or raw, as some people might say, and putting on Space Jam, Batman, Spider-Man, or any number of other variation of the 15 or less tapes that I had. There was something so incredible about putting in the tape and hearing the click as it got into place, rewinding it back, which you had to push the button for on mine, it wouldn't do it automatically. The rewind sound, I can still hear it in my ears today. The crackling on the screen, which I later learned was actually partially the tape and partially the AV cables and their connections. It's pure bliss to me. I even still have these memories too of going to Blockbuster and renting movies to watch, which still to this day I miss. Not necessarily the renting of movies portion, but definitely the physical space. Going in, picking something out, all the memorabilia, it was always stick in my mind. By the time I was born, VHS was actually being phased out. They were doing the split VHS and DVD players, but then mostly just fully switching to DVD. I still used my VHS player though. While I'm super nostalgic of VHS and VCR, I know that it was not the best way to watch a movie. However, it was the main format for watching a movie for over 30 years, which has to be recognized. Now, why would I call this film The Death of VHS? Seems a bit dramatic. Well, firstly, I'm a dramatic person. In all the best ways, of course. So, that's reason number one. But two, it's because VHS is actually dying. Not only for storage reasons, which I'll talk about soon, but also because of archives. Most archives will not keep VHS, especially blockbuster films. And they won't keep them in their vaults for a number of different reasons, but that's part of the reason why VHS is dying. And because nobody wants to purchase them anymore. What you see here is a chart describing to you the Queen's Film Archive, specifically pertaining to VHS. As you can see to the far left, 615 of these tapes of the first 1,000 out of 3,775 have all been discarded or disposed of. 279 of the first 1,000 are available, 13 are missing, 72 are reserved, which most of which actually describe as being scheduled to be disposed or have already been disposed of. 21 have errors, and the final bar is the 1,000 of the first 3,775 tapes. So you can see the majority here. Again, this is just the first 1,000 tapes. The majority of the VHS stock has been discarded or disposed of. Firstly, let's start with a little bit of the history of VHS.
Marty, shh, you'll scare the fish.
But we're missing the big football game.
Relax. My VHS home video recorder is taping it right now.
Terrific.
Watch.
Terrific. But suppose it's over 3 hours.
Relax. Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours of sports, movies, specials on one cassette.
Wow. This VHS is for me. We caught the whole game.
Best catch of the day.
Yeah.
VHS, the 4-hour system from Panasonic and other leading companies.
An article from Legacy Box perfectly describes the introduction to the VHS tape's history. They write the following. With VHS's victory, home videos proliferated. Companies were able to make much more affordable VCR units, making recording, creating, and watching home movies something that basically every household could afford to do. From the late 1970s to early 2000s, essentially every home had a VCR and a mountain of tapes to accompany it. Now, VHS, which quite literally stands for Video Home System, was a huge win for the average consumer. VHS was made for home viewing and for it to be inexpensive, especially in the later years when every company turned to making VHS tapes, as I just described in the article from Legacy Box. As far as I can tell, Sony was pretty much the only company that put up a bit of fight with the Betamax tapes, which they were also making Betacam tapes for production aspects, such as the news. VHS and the VCR system gave the average consumer the ability to record whatever they wanted from TV or to watch movies at home. As I suspected, VHS was one of the first ways that an individual could watch a blockbuster film in the comfort of their own home. As well, they could record TV and broadcasts and watch them anytime they'd like, especially things like sports games or the news, which typically came on when people were at work. This article that you can see is by Digital Trends, who describe the specific situation that was being ushered in by VHS. They say, and quote, "The biggest behavioral shift VHS ushered in was what was then known as time shift, a phenomenon so taken for granted today that it seems totally obvious. Before VHS, the only way to watch a movie or TV show was to watch it when it was available. For a movie, that meant seeing it in the theater when it was released, and maybe once more when it got a TV showing. If you wanted to see it again, well, tough. Buy the movie novelization. VHS changed all of this. You could rent or buy a videotape and watch it when and where it was convenient to you. If it was on television, where the term time shift was most commonly applied, you could set your VCR to record it and then view it at an hour that suited you. Most people used VHS because it was cheap and easy to obtain. Sony was still trying to push the Betamax tape, which was a much better quality, or so I've been told, but it was a lot more expensive. All video stores and a lot of just home stores carried VHS tapes. Even Giant Tiger carried VHS tapes until around the 2000s or so. And I know this because I recall a time when I was very ill at home and my dad went out to the Giant Tiger in our hometown to get some freezies and popsicles for me. He returned with the movie Small Soldiers, one of his favorites as a kid. I watched it and instantly fell in love. A cheap VHS movie, but a lifetime of happiness, and I'd say it helped me feel better too. So here's generally where my concern comes in. As VHS tapes were the main form of home viewing for several decades, why are we removing them from our history? The tapes themselves will degrade over time, which is very problematic, but why are archives getting rid of them? Especially considering what the VHS tapes carried. Not just the movies, but advertisements.
Hello. Gotham Corner Store? Yes, we seem to be down to our last Diet Coke. A gentleman is on his way to pick some up. Just look for a black car. No, this black car will be rather difficult to miss. And by the way, the gentleman is usually in quite a rush.
Just for the taste of it, Diet Coke.
What I've just shown you is an ad taken right from a Batman 1989 VHS tape, which I'll return to later. No other version of Batman 1989, DVD, Blu-ray, or etc. has this advertisement. But it's important, is it not? It's showing the consumerism at the time and also showing their marketing strategies, putting them right at the front of the movie so you had to see it. If Batman drinks Diet Coke, I definitely want to. That's the idea, isn't it? Even more important is any documentation of the ad. Good luck finding a decent version of this ad on YouTube or any at all. It took me a few searches to find it, but ultimately the one I'm showing you is taken right from the VHS tape. The following I have here is a news clipping talking about the use of a Coca-Cola ad for the VHS tape. I found this preserved on ProQuest and through the Queen's Archive, but an original article from the Billboard in 1989 was where this article originally came from. There is also the fact that VHS is significantly important to our ideas of home viewing and cinema itself. There have been many occasions where people have suggested that cinema would die. The birth of VHS, and then later DVD, and then later Blu-ray, and now even more with streaming services. How they work. The following image has been directly taken from Kodak and a photographer that they had take the photograph, Jens Peterson. This is directly on the Kodak website, by the way, so it is easily accessible. But with this image comes the following information, which again is taken directly from Kodak, and it describes how a VHS tape works. Firstly, this is what they describe as being the inside of a tape. Top and bottom pieces of the outer shell plastic, polypropylene, a moving spring-loaded door to protect the tape, 2 spools to hold the tape, an 800-foot-long, half-inch wide piece of oxide-coated mylar tape that acts as the recording medium, 2 spring-loaded locks to prevent the tape from unrolling inside the cassette, and several screws to hold the whole thing together. Secondly, this is what they describe as happening when a tape is played. When the tape is inserted into a VCR, the VCR uses a lever system to release and open the door, exposing the tape. It also inserts a pin inside the hole to disengage the lock on the spools. At that point, the driver can extract the tape and play it, which then will be transmitted through your AC cords or AV cords directly into your TV from the VCR, which will play. Finally, and this is the big thing, how they describe these tapes as dangerous or fragile, but also how they prompt you to purchase their digitization services. This is a direct quote. Fragile tape being surrounded by plastic sounds safe, but there are a lot of things that can happen over time and could potentially ruin your memories. To prevent your memories from damage, digitize them. Your VHS tapes are vital, important, and who really owns a VCR to watch their VHS tapes anymore? That's a direct quote. They're even admitting the fact that VHS tapes aren't really used anymore because nobody has a VCR. Now, the tape itself is very easy to damage, and you should be very cautious while handling a tape of any age or kind. However, this very fragile tape is part of the reason why VHS is difficult to archive. The following is taken from an article by Joe Arashi describing the cold storage process. When the tape is played, the stress of the tape transport system deforms the tape and causes the lubricant to exude to the tape surface, thus lubricating the tape. Once the deformation or stress is removed, the lubricant retreats back into the tape binder. Dynamics change under freezing temperatures. It is speculated that cold temperatures cause the lubricant to solidify and expand, squeezing it out of the tape binder pores and causing it to crystallize on the tape surface, despite no physical stress being applied to the tape. Again, that's taken right from an article written by Joe Arashi describing this cold storage process. Now, you probably don't know what this means exactly, but it's pretty clear. VHS can't survive in a cold storage like DVDs, CDs, or even original film, which actually thrive in a cold storage with no moisture. No matter where a VHS tape is placed, no matter cold or warm storage, assumingly warm storage will cause it to degrade more quickly. However, it is very likely to degrade over time no matter what, no matter where you place it.
I'm Heather Holm. I work at Queen's University Archives and have for a very long time, dealing mostly with private records, and that includes a certain number of audiovisual. And I'm sitting down with Griffen to have a talk about VHS. But unlike film, I mean, again, part of the problem is with video is that it can be recorded over. Mm-hmm. And so what we do actually end up with is not often, the tapes are usually in worse shape because if it's home movies sort of stuff, because they were probably used again and again or watched again and again, as opposed to a film. And it's just a more stable medium. But yeah, I think it changed what was and put it into the hands of way more people, mm-hmm. Than who would have had movie cameras. I mean, I think it is actually quite hard. We used to always warn people, and I think everybody had that, like, don't put your, VHS tapes near a big magnet or keep them away. But most often people kept them around their televisions in warm spots, so not the best storage. I'm not an expert on the technical, but it isn't that like what it allows you to do. I kind of like the beauty of that. Like that's partly why we still, we don't, when we make a digital recording of a VHS, we don't tend to go in and fix it a lot, right? Because there is that, like, this is what it looks like. And to us, it's also important to, like, this was what was possible. You can't make it that much better so that it doesn't really, when we provide digital copies out to people, if people then want to fix it, they can do that. They can make it better. But we don't tend to do that because there is an aesthetic that is there, that's what we're interested in having as the digital copy is kind of that relic, of what it is. Magnetic media just does not have, and there's the whole, again, I go back to film. Film it's a more stable medium. It needs a light source in the human eye in order to access the content. Hardware is a huge problem, with, viewing a VHS, right? And getting a good VH and the players themselves. So the tape it's consumer grade, it's sort of like newspapers, right? It's pulp. It's like the pulp of the film world, or video world. It was meant for sort of mass consumption and mass use. But it wasn't that, therefore it degrades, in that same kind of way as like newspaper. And the machines that were also made were not, because it was consumer, again, is not, they weren't great machines, they're not highly technically advanced. But it is hard to find, there are different, obviously, grades of VHS, that were used in production and not in production. But it's hard to find, like you can literally have one player play something in one way and another player play something in another way. Like it all depends on the technology. And because you have that intermediary between you and what's on the tape, you've just added more possibilities for complication and degradation and all of that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. Store it, like standing up, the reel on the bottom. You should have rewind projects where you rewind it, and not at fast speeds, but where you play it through to one end and leave it on another end for a while, because of just the nature of the media. And it likes, we do have a vault that is of a sort of like paper film, video, they all have different. Film likes it cold. Video doesn't like it cold. Yeah, so I think it is there. It has different needs, but we generally keep it with most of our audiovisual, because we have a lot of tape, like audio tapes here that are magnetic media. Like we sort of have all of our magnetic media in one vault. But we don't have an awful lot, but it's usually coming from private donors. We have more, I think we talked about before, more U-matics here. And again, it's more because that was more of a production format as opposed to the sort of consumer format.
Okay. Do you know the temperature of the...
Oh, we have readings. Yeah. Well, currently up there, it's probably around 16 degrees.
Okay. In like the standard...
In our stand, anywhere there is between, well, it depends on what you like. It can be whatever for like, depending on how extreme you want to go. Most of our vaults are between sort of 15 and I would say 18, with a relative humidity between 40 and 60.
Okay.
That is our sort of standard vault. Some vaults are a little bit less. That one may have a little bit less humidity.
Because I know film is like a cold storage system.
Yes,
yeah.
Which is ideal
Yeah.
for it. But you can also store film in that same, like the cooler, the better. We have freezers downstairs, though, for our film that has, again, film as a media. There's my nostalgia. You've got nostalgia for VHS.
Yeah.
I've got a nostalgia for film. But also because of its ability, its lifespan.
Yeah.
It's really does not need much interference. I mean, no, we don't want to store nitrate next to a furnace, but
No.
It lasts for a long time. Like we have film here from 100, years ago, more than that. And it's still in relatively good shape without an awful lot of interference, right? Where benign neglect was dealt to these objects for a long time. And that's the other thing is that, VHS is a little bit, it's, if you forget about it and if you aren't taking care of it, then it has the sort of ability or non-ability to sort of keep itself in a stable format. It is just in regular circumstances going to be breaking down faster than film. But that's my stuff. I mean, that's where sort of like what we are generally archiving versus some of the stuff that you're talking about. Because what you're talking about is stuff that's owned by people and production companies, and there's vested consumer interest. And, like you cannot, I here at the archives couldn't just decide that my copy of Pan's Labyrinth, that we have here, that we're going to digitize it and make that available. Not going to happen, right? Like we cannot do that because of copyright law and all of those types of things. We can though, and we do. So we're getting rid of VHS within archives, for us is around the media actually just degrading to a point that we worry that we won't get a good copy. And that said, I mean, as I said before, like we had a project around our 3/4-inch U-matics, because that's, again, magnetic media, older than VHS, but that it is at the end of its lifespan. Yeah, that is part of those are always parts of our consideration. There is always legislation and law that does affect what we digitize. And what we don't, but it isn't like we're doing VHS is no good, but it is when the VHS is dying, when the media is actually dying, then we will transfer it. And so we're only sort of we're not removing the content from our collections. We're merely removing the format or reformatting it, right? So we're not actually, and it will always be known that this new format, though, was taken from a VHS format. Like we're always referencing what format the original was in, because it also helps you to understand the format that you're currently looking
Okay. Did I tell you about the Queen's, like the film archive?
But that was I'm going to imagine a lot of off-air recordings of things, right?
No, it was Blockbusters, actually.
No, it was Blockbusters, which is why they can't digitize those or really. And if the media is dying and they can't digitize, there's a lot of rights, especially also in educational libraries of what you can. It's a whole thing in the library too. You should even things that and I'm not all up on, there may be somebody else you should talk to, but we may own the physical copy of something, but we still need to license the electronic copy.
Or you need the person's permission who made it.
Yeah. It's a different format, right? It's sort of like re-released. And so the sort of copyright renews again, but we couldn't just sort of say, oh, we're going to take everything that's in the library. During COVID, actually, was an interesting time because a lot of stuff opened up because the library, it was like we physically, where it was sort of like we physically have a copy of this. We would like to make it available. And so there were some things because people couldn't come in and actually take out the physical copies, where sort of licensing opened up just a little around some of that, but mostly for things that were out of copyright and older. But yeah, that's.
To wrap up, I'm going to consider the differences between VHS and Blu-ray, as the two are very, very different, as you can probably tell. Much like the archivist, though, the person in charge of doing this process of renewing the old footage might have the ability to take creative liberties. In Jaws, the footage from the Blu-ray was an original widescreen format, as apparently Spielberg shot on an Area Flex, in a similar aspect ratio to what you see in the Blu-ray. However, I have been told, or I did skim through, suggesting that it was a 35mm film in the early years. However, it was a widescreen format. The interesting thing about this, though, is that even with the VHS tape being a 4/3 aspect ratio, you can actually see some almost different editing. As you can see in the widescreen format, you can see everything that is in the VHS. However, because the VHS has a smaller aspect ratio, it actually cuts down the size of the frame, as naturally would happen with a different aspect ratio. But when a different person speaks, it actually pans over to them so you can see them. Whereas in the widescreen version, everything is on screen at the same exact time, which almost made me wonder if there was different editing involved, or if that was just naturally what would happen with a different aspect ratio, which the camera would pan or whatever. That being said, for Batman, you can see this very extreme blue tint with the 4K version. In the VHS copy, you can clearly see more color is present, especially with these scenes with the green gas that I'm going to show you, and you can see it very clearly in the difference between the two comparison videos that I put at the very end. That being said, also listen to the audio quality. They're not that much different where the audio quality would be extremely apparent to me if I was watching any different version. In fact, because I know that these two movies are old, I'm naturally kind of expecting a different look or sound that I would probably expect from a brand new movie on a 4K release. However, you can hear in the 4K Blu-ray version a lot of sound cutting. They've actually cut out a lot of the background noise that you'd hear in the VHS version. Take a good listen and try and decipher the difference. But in the VHS version, you can clearly hear footsteps and crowd screaming and a lot of movement. However, in the 4K Blu-ray version, it almost sounds like they cut a lot of that out. So you can actually really only hear the Joker when he's moving around. and then when he talks, and then when he shoots Bob. But I'm pretty sure I cut that part out. Either way, though, you can very clearly see a very, very big difference in this.
Let's see how we did. Mirror. Mirror! said that the nerves were completely severed, Mr. Napier. You see what I have to work with here.
That you, Sugar Bumps? Who the hell are you?
It's me, Sugar Bumps.
Oh, thank God you're alive. I heard you'd been
Fried? Is that what you heard? You set me up over a woman. A woman! Must be insane. Don't bother.
Your life won't be worth spit!
I've been dead once already. It's very liberating. You should think of it as therapy.
Jack, listen. Maybe we can cut a deal.
Jack. Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker. And as you can see, I'm a lot happier. What a day.
He stole my balloons! He stole my balloons!
Let Hooper take a turn.
Hooper drives the boat, Chief.
Stop playing with yourself, Hooper. Slow ahead, if you please. You heard him. Slow ahead. Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this shit.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much all I have for you today. I'm going to wrap up by saying that VHS, while it is very nostalgic to me and I care about it quite deeply, I think it's also important to note that as times change, naturally we're going to want better quality things. However, for me, there's something oddly special about watching an old movie that would have been released on VHS and watching it in its original format. That watching a movie in some form that's not that much different than what you would see in a movie theater at the time is extremely cool and also very, very important to the history at the time. Not only is looking at the consumerism for the time important, but it's also very important to recognize these difference in features, okay, than what we have today. Looking at Blu-ray and 4K versions, they're spectacular, but that's not what the original format was. So isn't it more important for us to look at a movie the way we would have looked at it if we were in that time than maybe looking at it in a 4K Blu-ray format that ultimately doesn't necessarily convey its age? Editing styles and sound and all these things naturally would show us what that movie would have looked like at the time. But to be honest, it's kind of difficult for me because I would watch either formats. I could care less whether there's a bit of scratchy or some audio pops. I just find it very fascinating to watch that movie in its original format. And that being said, I think it's very important to note that this is what we were looking at the time. And there's so many other reasons why we should be considering saving VHS tapes, whether they be a Blockbuster video or not. Thank you.